Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Bani Israel, chapter 17, and we will cover verses 106 to 111, and 111 is the last verse of this chapter. The Quran to be learnt in progressive steps. These are the references, and this is our contact in case anyone wishes to contact ERasool Islam regarding this presentation or any of our previous presentation, or for that matter, any other issue or regarding, for example, books. They can contact through this WhatsApp number. Recap verses 101 to 105. By referring to the tussle between Pharaoh and the messenger Musa, here the Quran has reminded us that the confrontation between Batil and Haqq is nothing new. The tale of the history of mankind presents clear evidence of the functioning of the law of requital of Allah. When nations resort to inequities and injustices, clear signs of their wrong path appear before their eyes, but they do not wish to take notice of these. And we can witness this in today's world, that even within the man-made system, there are a lot of scholarly people, and those who are more rational are warning their governments and telling them that your path is wrong, but they are insisting on following the wrong path. The same thing happened in the case of the destruction of Pharaoh and his people. Signs did appear before them, which were the consequences of their ill deeds. But despite the warning from the messenger Musa, Pharaoh ignored these signs. And this is something to do with human psyche, that human beings who are doing injustices and are tyrannical and bad towards others, their psyche changes to that kind of depraved state that they can't get out of it. And this is something for us to study and also observe in others. Instead, Pharaoh accused the messenger Musa of using deception and lies. As a consequence, Pharaoh and his cohorts were drowned through their own error of judgment. We expanded this aspect a bit further, that if we are, for example, in today's world, want that Allah's laws should help us, then a Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen has to emerge and do something about what is going on in the world if they want to accelerate the process. Otherwise, whole thing moves forward through trial and tribulation at a very slow evolutionary pace. Bani Israel became established in the land after the demise of Pharaoh, but they were also warned not to transgress the laws of Allah. Otherwise, they too will suffer destruction. Despite this warning, they also resorted to disobedience and hence suffered destructions. Now, the Quran is made available to provide guidance on all of these aspects. It gives a warning in the event of disobedience to it and gives glad tidings if people follow it. An overview of today's presentation. The Quran has been divided into parts and was revealed in stages. This helped to acquire understanding in it by moving progressively forward. The same is applicable today. Whether people accept Eimaan in the Quran or not, it makes no difference, as it is their own loss. And that is an important aspect which we should keep always in our mind, because as human beings, we tend to forget that not following the Quran is our own loss. However, those who have prior knowledge of the Wahi of Allah, when the Quran is recited to them, they bow down in front of its guidance. Their response is that their Rabb has fulfilled his promise by revealing this guidance for them. They feel moved by the message of the Quran, and it increases their devotion to its guidance. All the divine attributes are balanced, and it makes no difference by which attribute people call upon Allah. The issue is to obey the Quranic values so that these attributes are manifested in the system of Deen. With regard to the system of Salat, speech should be kept at a medium balanced tone, neither too quiet nor too loud. This is also applicable when sharing its message with others. Coming to grips with three facts is important. Firstly, Allah has no son. Secondly, do not associate any partner in his rule. Thirdly, he does not need any helper. Finally, it is through the obedience of Wahi that his greatness will be established in the human world, i.e. through the system of Deen. And now we go to the first verse of today's presentation, 17:106, the Quran to be learned progressively in measured stages. وَقُرْآنًا فَرَقْنَهُ لِتَقْرَأَهُ عَلَى النَّاسِ عَلَى مُكْثٍ وَنَزَّلْنَاهُ تَنزِيلًا. Since the purpose of the sending down of the Quran was that after properly reflecting and reasoning on this, for people to decide whether they accept it or not. Hence, we have sent it down in stages, little by little, have not sent all of it down in one go. An important point noted over here for our guidance, and we'll go through some of these points in our slides, and have expounded every single one of its realities separately from each other. When such a perspicuous book will be presented before the people gradually in stages, then for those people who are in search of haqq, it will become easier to reach reality. Further reflections. In the previous verse, the Quran stated that it is sent down with haqq and through haqq, i.e. it is completely based on haqq, and if followed as directed within its folds, then the results will be as described in it. Just follow the path, and then the results themselves will become evidence of the truth of its guidance. So some of the people, why they get frustrated? Because they try to understand it academically and do not follow it. And then they wish to see those results manifested around them, which can only be manifested by following the Quran. Because the first change which has to come is within our own psyche. And we have gone through these aspects previously. Continuing from the previous verse, here the Quran has presented before us another very important aspect of its guidance, which, if not fully grasped, leads to frustration, impatience, and at times the giving up of striving on this path of haqq. Next point is the layout of the Quran is such that it is divided into various parts, which are communicated in steps for the human intellect to learn in stages. Here it is stated that in this way the messenger can convey it to mankind in parts. And that is an important point, that we should not pick and choose from the Quran what suits us, and then pick up a verse and start giving it some meaning and trying to satisfy our own self. It is not possible. Every verse has to be seen in the overall context of the Quran, and then it has to be cross-referenced, and then this has to be viewed within the system of Deen and the stage at which humanity is, and we are trying to solve that problem. We have to look at that stage as well. So the Quran is progressively telling us where to start and where we find the word around us, and then we start from there and try to understand it with the true perspective. However, all these parts are interconnected, and through cross-referencing, we can understand every aspect of it clearly. And that is what we do on this platform, that we cross-reference it extensively. Though we cannot do everything because of the paucity of time, but we do look at some of the important cross-referencing so that things become clear within the context of the system of Deen. Few more comments on this verse. The concluding part of the verse draws our attention to another important aspect in the study of the Quran. It states that وَنَزَّلْنَاهُ تَنزِيلًا, we have revealed it by stages, because it is to establish the system of Deen. Hence, those attracted by its guidance will accept and understand it not in one go, but gradually, step by step. And we remember that previously we have covered some aspects where the messenger was told to go through the Quran during early part of the morning and of course during the day as well, and to discuss it with his colleagues and his companions. This aspect can be understood by using the simile of becoming a doctor. A student has to go through various stages of learning and practicing before he or she can become a practicing physician. I quoted this example just to illustrate to ourselves that there is no point in hurrying through the Quran. We simply cannot hurry through it and then understand it as a system of Deen. And it cannot be done over a few years' time. It is a long process of educating ourselves and then at the same time developing ourselves. In a good system of education and training, there is no shortcut in this process. the same is exactly applicable in the study of the Quran. And interesting is that in the matter of professional education and training, we understand that because we see that man-made system working around us. But once it comes to the Quran, somehow we expect a miracle from Allah that overnight we will understand everything. That's not possible. In the case of the Quran, both the heart and mind need to accept its guidance, which demands an internal change, and this gradual change in the human psyche is clearly signposted in detail. The kind of outlook which the Quran demands from man simply cannot be manifested in the outer world without a complete inner transformation. Human desire, motivation, resolve, and need play an effective role in this transformation. And we have to be aware of that as well. For example, while we are going through this presentation and going through various points, we should be fully aware of it, that we are listening to it and our motivation is into it and it is our need and this is our desire as well. So that our heart and mind is fully focused on what is being shared over here. The bottom line is that if one is not looking at the Quran as an alternative system called Deen, then its guidance will remain out of reach, even if one goes through it repeatedly, or for that matter, even memorizes it by heart. It is not to put down anyone. The issue over here is that why we are not getting the results, or how should we get the results of the Quran over a period of time, so that we understand the problems faced by humanity and what solutions are presented by the Quran within the context of the system of Deen. Next, I'm covering two verses, 17, 107 and 108, displaying signs of its acceptance. قُلْ آمِنُوا بِهِ أَوْ لَا تُؤْمِنُوا إِنَّ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ إِذَا يُتْلَى عَلَيْهِمْ يَخِرُّونَ لِلْأَذْقَانِ سُجَّدًا وَيَقُولُونَ سُبْحَانَ رَبِّنَا إِنْ كَانَ وَعْدُ رَبِّنَا لَا مَفْعُولًا. O Rasool, say to these people that whether you accept this book or due to your arrogance and prejudice reject it, no difference in the truth of this book will result from this. In actual fact, this book can only be understood by the use of knowledge and vision. Hence, those people who already have knowledge, when this is presented before them, they recognize its grandeur and bow before it and exclaim that undoubtedly all the promises of our Rabb will be fulfilled. And knowledge over here, we know that it means the information is converted into some kind of an analytical outcome of that this information, how we are going to use it in the practical world. And that then becomes knowledge, knowing something. Further reflections on these two verses. These two verses point to a revolutionary change which takes place within the human psyche on this path of assuming higher responsibility on behalf of Allah. It may appear daunting initially, but if we look at the steps involved in acquiring this guidance, then we will see that the Quran takes us through every step meticulously and methodically. And that is why Quran says that it is revealed in stages. And that is why it is telling us that you have to go through it exactly through the same stages in which the Quran was revealed. Though we have got the Quran as a complete book, however, we also need to go through it in stages, taking the time to reflect on every step patiently and attentively. We also need to figure out which part of the Quranic guidance is applicable at various stages. And that's another important point to be determined as well. That is, we have to find out first which stage is applicable here and which part of the Quran is now applying to this particular stage of coming to grips with different aspects of the system of Deen. This also includes the process of self-development. Firstly, it is made clear that whether people accept Eimaan in its guidance or do not have Eimaan, this will have an effect on the way they live their life. We know that for centuries after the initial era of Islam, human beings do not consider taking guidance from the Book of Allah despite suffering at the hands of man-made systems. Mostly we have seen that people don't even think about it, that there is something available within the Quran as a system. Because Within the religious context, they see it as a book which is for giving them some kind of a reward in the hereafter. And that is very misleading. Those who keep merely reciting it day and night against the instruction of the Quran without looking at the system of Deen contained within it live a life of humiliation full of fear and grief. Because they do not pause and reflect. And all of us who have gone through this religious stage previously can understand it because we can relate to our own mentality at that, what we had at that point in time. They do not for a moment think to use the prescription contained within it to treat their condition of fear and grief. Because fear and grief is a psychological disease and it is created by the environment in which we are living. Some of it is created by us, from within us, and some of it is created by the environment in which we are living, and the man-made system always creates fear and grief. Now, commenting on change in the human psyche with regard to these two verses. Secondly, of those who happen to have knowledge about the solution presented by the Quran, the majority do not wish to obtain benefit from it. Here, the Quran has also pointed to a sign of these people who have grasped its core value system, and as a result, a total transformation of their psyche has taken place, which is noted here. What is that change in their psyche? Since they are looking for guidance have also acquired some prior knowledge of this, hence when these verses are recited to them, they recognize the truth of it and bow down before its value system. And bowing down over here does not mean the physical bowing down. It means that their hearts and minds are accepting it. They become prone towards it. Their hearts and minds find no resistance in accepting it because they are looking for it. They are fed up with the man-made system and they want some solution. Prior knowledge may also mean those people who were looking for guidance after reading their tempered books. And this could be in reference to the people of the book, because some of them did come to the Quran and accepted its message and its system. This is an interesting part of the verse which, using the simile of seed and fertile land, when the seed is about to be sown, it is told by the land that you will grow as I am ready to accept you and help you to grow. I just thought about this simile and I thought it is quite good and wanted to share it with you, that normally we see seed being sown into the land, but if we look at the seed from the point of view of the land, which is ready to accept this seed, then we can relate it to the guidance of the Quran. The Quran provides that fertility to the human heart and mind for it to accept the seed of Eimaan. But this seed we have to create ourselves. And once we have created ourselves, then the land of the Quran is absolutely ready to grow this seed further. Next is why the emphasis on rational thinking and reasoning. The Quran notes here the state of the selves of people with Iman, declaring that Yutla alayhim yakhiruna leazkane sujjadan. When it is recited to them, they fall down on their faces in prostration. Obviously, this is metaphorically. The way the verse is translated, it appears as it refers to the prostrations observed in daily ritual prayers. This needs to be viewed within the setup of the system of Deen. Deen needs those people to manage its affairs whose Iman is 100%, and this must meet the criterion laid down by the Book of Allah. This is very important to understand that whatever we do after getting educated and trained by the Quran and through self-development, it should translate into some practical measure, practical manifestation in the outer world. It should not become some kind of a ritual which will take us away from the path of the Quran. The next verse, in fact, casts further light on this when from their lips the Quran states that they say, Subhana Rabbina in kana wa'du Rabbina la maf'ula. To our Rabb with all his expanse and attributes, because we have to get benefits from the divine attributes, and we cannot get the benefit from those divine attributes unless firstly we understand them and then start to manifest them. Truly the promise of our Rabb has been fulfilled. If we reflect on the timeline of what is noted here, we can figure out that by following the laws of Allah, that state of the system of Deen has arrived where the promises noted in Wahi are being fulfilled through the hands of Jamaat-e-Momineen. Implicit here is the assumption that the Mu'mineen have displayed full commitment to the cause of Allah and are fulfilling their side of the deal with Allah as noted in this verse of Surah Tawbah. And we remember that over there Quran states, Allah states that Mu'mineen are those who have given their life and possessions in the path of Allah to Allah. Now next verse 17, 109, progressive increase in understanding. وَيَخِرُّونَ لِلْأَذْقَانِ يَبْكُونَ وَيَزِيدُهُمْ خُشُوعًا. Its greatness and truth overwhelms their hearts in such a way that they fall down in prostrations and their eyes become tearful and the inclination of their hearts increases further. Some more signs noted over here. Need for high motivation and persistence. This verse adds to what is stated in the previous verses and needs a profound reflection as it points to an important portent of change in the human psyche when individuals accept Eimaan with the full complicity of their heart and mind. This verse should be cross-referenced with another verse, وَالَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِّرُوا بِآيَاتِ رَبِّهِمْ لَمْ يَخِرُّوا عَلَيْهَا سُمًّا وَعُمْيَانًا. Those who, when they are admonished with the signs of their Rabb, droop not down at them as if they were deaf and blind. And we know that when the attribute of Rabb comes, it is with reference to the system of Rububiyyat. So these people, these Jamaat-e-Momineen, they accept everything related to Rububiyyat through their own rational thinking and reasoning, and then accept it. They don't give up, but they keep trying till the time they fully understand what this system is asking from them, individually as well as collectively. So acting deaf and blind is not an option for the follower of the Quran. Here, one of the signs of these people is noted regarding the use of a rational mind and its reasoning prowess. These people look at the problems faced by humanity and then in their pursuit of haqq, look at the solution presented by the Quran. They question every aspect of the system of Rububiyyat, and we can see Zukkiru bi-ayati Rabbihim, and come to this conclusion that the Quran explains the purpose of human creation, the concept of Allah relating to self-development, lays down the concept of the life of the hereafter, the unity of mankind, etc. And we can add more from our learning from the Quran. They ultimately reach this understanding that if its precepts are followed, then they are not alone in the world, and the man-made system can be changed with the help of Allah. Since such people are moved and affected by the misery and poverty in the world, and that is where our tears come into it, that when we see misery and poverty, we look for solution, and we do become tearful as well, and it causes us lot of pain. And then we look towards the Quran and Allah and find the solution. Hence, their sensitive hearts become alive to these issues of life, and they feel the pain of humanity at large. This also makes them tearful. They wish to do something about it, and in this pursuit of theirs become exposed to the guidance of the Quran, a supreme blessing of Allah. Because the moment one finds the solution given in the Quran and we see the misery in the world and we can relate the two, then we know how much Quran has pointed to yatim and miskeen and the issues related to them. And then once we found the solution, then we proceed forward and progress on this path. Some cross-referencing of verses. This whole process of coming to grips with the Quranic system of Deen exposes their psyche to a lofty aim of life, and that is where they sometimes become overwhelmed by these finer feelings which arise in their hearts and minds and lead to this conclusion, Rabbana ma khalaqta haza batila. O our Rabb, not for batil have you created this. Because when people who have come to the Quran, when they see misery and poverty and fear and grief and yatim miskeen in the world, they might think that this whole creation of Allah is without a purpose, without an aim. But then once we reflect on everything given in the Quran and know all the outlines of the system of Deen, and we also know that Allah's law is there to help us in this pursuit, then we come to this conclusion, Rabbana ma khalaqta haza batila, that Allah's creation is haq and it is for constructive outcomes. This is not a religious emotive state where people weep and cry out of fear to get their sins forgiven. Not at all. And we see plenty of this when people go for Umrah and Hajj. This is a rational, passionate expression when Mu'mineen become exposed to the higher purpose of life set for them by the ultimate reality. Their intellect becomes fully convinced of the attainability of the higher purpose of life set for them by Allah in the Quran. And that is where the softening of the hearts take place, where we understand that what is the purpose of the Quran is to get Allah's help by using all the value system which is given in the Quran, in the book of Allah. It is that ecstatic inner state to which one is exposed after finding a solution to a problem which has kept one sleepless and desperate for a long time. Discovering the true reality of our existence in this world and then acquiring an awareness far wider than the previous one with the assurance of the hereafter is not an ordinary achievement. And the Quran has drawn our attention to this feat in some verses. And I have quoted over here a verse, and I would like that if we can ponder over it, reflect over it in our own time for some few weeks. وَسَارِعُوا إِلَى مَغْفِرَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ وَجَنَّةٍ أَرْضُهَا السَّمَاوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضُ أُعِدَّتْ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. Just see, this is for muttaqeen. Be quick in the race for protection from your Rabb and for a Jannat whose width is that of the heavens and of the earth prepared for muttaqeen. Further reflections on this verse. Having set out on this path of Deen, there is no going back, as with the pleasure and hope which arises in their hearts, and then the unity of their hearts with those who are already on this path, they become convinced that this is the path for them. The more they progress together on this path, the more the evidence of its being haq keeps on strengthening their hearts. They now reach an understanding of the word and its functioning with the help of the light of Wahi. Because previously they were in dark, and now the light of Wahi has exposed them to those parts of the man-made systems which were hidden from them. Towards the end of the verse, it mentions a tangible sign before us related to self-development. It says, وَيُزِيدُهُمْ خُشُوعًا. It increases their determination to follow the laws of Allah. Having understood the importance of their creation, that is their own creation, and the creation around them, the higher purpose of life, the next stage is to keep pursuing the path defined by Wahi of Allah. This is a supreme achievement to be on this path through choice and then to strive together. The rewards of this path are never ending. Falahum ajrun ghayru mamnoon. Iman plus salih deeds lead to infinite rewards in human life. Now let us go to the next verse, 17:110. Remain focused on the aim of Rububiyat. Qul adullaha awidur rahmana ayya ma tad'u falahul asma'ul husna. Wala tajhar bi salatika wala tukhafit biha wabtagi baina zalika sabila. O Rasool, say to them that keep your gaze on the reality. Do not engage in a futile war of words. Whether you call him Allah or Rahman, due to this there is no change in the actual reality. And whether you call him using the name of his being or through his attributes, whichever name you use is fine. All these are different aspects of the beauty and glamour of his being, various features of the one and the same reality. The question is not by what name should Allah be called. The question is what kind of Allah should be accepted. The meaning of correct Eimaan in Allah is that all his attributes should be accepted with which he has introduced himself in the Quran. If from among these one attribute is accepted and the other is denied, for example, just as in Christianity accepts his attribute of mercy but does not acknowledge the attribute of justice, that is the law of requital, this will not be called Eimaan in Allah. Very important point noted over here in this verse. And in Salat, neither is it necessary that it should be called out loudly nor with total silence. Rather, it is preferable to adopt the middle path between these two. Now, importance of divine attributes. Continuing from the previous verse, here the Quran guides us on another very important and sensitive issue which has attained great significance within the domain of sectarian versions of Islam. Here the verse tells us that the issue is not by which name you term the name of Allah, which are in reality His attributes. The issues before you should be how to acquire the correct concepts which can help you in changing your psyche, which can then lead to correctly understanding the processes and procedures by which human world functions. So that is important. Merely saying words from our tongue means nothing, because this is just hot air. It doesn't change anything outwardly or inwardly within us. Because if something changes within us, then we are going to manifest it in the outer world. And despite names of Allah being repeated so many times in every day, nothing is changing in the world in which we live. We know that the Quran commences with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, normally translated as in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Its prevalent practical application is to recite it before starting any task without paying any heed to what it signifies in relation to the establishment of the system of Deen. We will go through this verse once we start from the Quran in our next presentation. But we should keep in mind that this verse at the beginning of the Quran is pointing to the program of Allah in relation to the system of Rububiyyat. And whole of the Quran then is its explanation. So that is how we should view it, rather than just customarily repeating it without having any change within us or any change in the outer world. The Quran puts repeated emphasis on precision and asks us to say that which we are not going to act upon. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu lima taquluna ma la taf'alun. Now, this is something very important to understand, that if we say things which are meant to bring some change in the outer world, and those changes do not take place, or we do not make an effort to bring those changes practically, then essentially we are going against this permanent value of the Quran. O Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen, why do you say that which you are not going to do? And this is the irony of the whole situation, that 5 times in the religious world, these words are repeated and nothing changes in the outer world. So according to this verse, we are acting as criminals according to the Quran. Changing psyche to understand the Quran. Here, by mentioning Allah, our attention is first drawn towards the acceptance of His laws as noted in the Quran, and then by mentioning Rahman, our attention is drawn to this fact that if we follow the Quran, then the results of our efforts will appear in one lifetime. Try it and see whether this happens or not. For example, verses in Surah Rahman, Ar-Rahmanu Allama al-Quran. Those who want to move things on an emergent time scale need to get to grips with knowledge of the Quran. Then the verse states, Ayyama tad'u falahul asma'ul husna. By whatever attribute you call upon Him, for to Him belong the most balanced attributes. So the Quran is saying that do not confine yourself to one attribute. Go and learn the whole of it and then manifest these by coming together and see how the outer world changes. Because the inner world will change first, and then the outer world is bound to change in response to our inner psyche. An important fact of life is stated here for the guidance of Mu'mineen, that all these divine attributes are there to help them with acquire a higher understanding, which is a prerequisite for establishing Deen. After understanding the importance of these attributes, acquire them, making them a part of the self's development, and then manifest them. Then see how the inner and outer world begins to transform in direct proportion to your efforts on this path. Congregations for Salat. The concluding part of the verse is, وَلَا تَجْهَرْ بِصَلَاتِكَ وَلَا تُخَافِتْ بِهَا وَابْتَغِي بَيْنَ ذَلِكَ سَبِيلًا, which is translated as, neither speak your prayer aloud nor speak it in a low tone, but seek a middle course between. And if we go with these kind of translations, then see what can happen. Nothing will change in the outer world. According to religious versions, this is related to the recitation of the Quran during the 5 daily prayers. But the interesting part is that in 2 prayers, for example, Zuhr and Asr, loud recitation is not done. And the Imam conducts the prayer silently. Why is this? The meaning of this verse becomes clear if it is related to the system of Salat, which includes assemblies for consultation to discuss important issues facing the Ummah. Here, guidance is provided to conduct conversation during these affairs in balanced tones and do not include any shouting and raising of voices. If everyone understands the issues as per the agenda and have acquired a good understanding of the Quranic values, then this should be the criterion to conduct its affairs. It may also mean to not remain silent and not contribute when serious issues related to the system are being discussed, as silence may affect important decision-making processes. Very important point which we are sharing over here, that we have seen that in a man-made system, in some meetings, people prefer to remain quiet and bad decisions are made, whereas people are meant to speak out. And because if we keep silent at a critical moment when important decisions are being made, then essentially we are promoting evil in the world. We are promoting a wrong system in the world. And more so in the case of the Quran, we simply cannot keep silent. We have to speak up wherever we find something wrong is happening. And the best way is to come together and work for the system of Deen. So under the system of Deen, people will not remain quiet, but they will not also shout. But they will use the power of their reasoning, that rational thinking, within the confines of the permanent values, and that is how they will proceed and make decisions. There is a lot to think about it. We can see to what extent the Quran has gone to guide us in terms of dealing with the finer aspects of the human psyche so that we conduct the affairs of Deen amicably and efficiently. Note the messenger is addressing the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen, i.e. collective action. Now we go to the last verse of Surah Bani Israel and of course of our presentation. The concept of Allah outlined. وَقُلِ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ الَّذِي لَمْ يَتَّخِذْ وَلَدًا وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ شَرِيكٌ فِي الْمُلْكِ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ وَلِيٌّ مِنَ الذُّلِّ وَكَبِّرْهُ تَكْبِيرًا. The pristine concept of Allah which the Quran presents is the concept of Allah based on fact. According to this concept, it is also incorrect that He has some son. It is also incorrect that anyone is a partner in His sovereignty and authority. And it is also incorrect that due to some weakness of His, He is in need of some helper. That Allah is the sole possessor of all powers without any partner or associate. This is that very concept of Allah which is deserving of hamd and appreciation. The aim of your life should be that His system and laws overcome all other systems of the world and laws of life. And this way the supremacy of His throne of authority becomes established in the human world in the way it is established in the external universe. And we can see وَكَبِّرْهُ تَكْبِيرًا. And Allahu Akbar is said in our azan 5 times every day in the Muslim lands. And we can see in terms of practical application of this verse where we stand in the world. The psyche for Deen needs to be precise and focused. This is the last verse of this surah, and the Quran sums up some important aspects of its guidance here, which also set the scene for the next surah. Firstly, it is stated to pronounce Alhamdulillah. Hamd is for Allah with all His attributes, and we need to closely examine this aspect in order to understand what it means to follow this guidance of the Quran. We will deal with it once we go to the explanation of Surah Al-Fatiha, the first chapter of the Quran. But hamd is something which emanates out of what Allah has created around us. That is His signs. It is not trying to praise Him, but it is what benefits we are accruing from following the laws of Allah, and then spontaneously we say that these laws are for our benefits, and once we have followed these laws, then these are bringing those benefits to us. So Allah's law is proven right. And this is by following the Sirat Mustaqim, by following Haqq, not by following Batil and then praising Allah with every sentence we speak without understanding what it means. Because it is not about praise of Allah, it is related to what is happening in the outer world and what can take place once the system of Deen has been established. And we need to closely examine this aspect in order to understand what it means to follow this guidance of the Quran. It is not about praising him, as he does not need words of praise from human beings, as he is far above these kinds of concepts. It is about getting the facts of life right so that human beings can derive the best from the guidance of Allah. For a detailed explanation of this, we should go through Surah Al-Fatiha, which is explained in detail in the Meanings of the Quran, Volume 1, which has been published. Secondly, they should know that procreation is at the biological level and not at the level of the self. Allah is far above these kinds of human concoctions that Allah has got a son. Because he is non-biological, this whole reproduction process is related to being biological. Even in our own case, at a self level, we cannot pass on our own qualifications, education, understanding to our children. So this is simply not possible for a self to create another self similar to their own self. It is a biological process. And over here, I've quoted a verse from the Quran, Anna yakunu lahu waladun wa lam takun lahu sahibatun. How can he have a son when he has no consort? So if Allah doesn't have a wife, because he's non-biological, so he can't have a son. No self which possesses choice and intent can procreate at the level of itself. Because to have children, there has to be a man and a woman, and that is how the children come into this life, into this world. It is a biological aspect related to the physical body. This is an important aspect which we need to grasp in order to understand the aspect of self-development. Another important aspect is that those people who give these kind of belief system abode within their own mind, in their own cognitive makeup, they will always struggle to come to the Quran because they will never understand these things. The false beliefs, if we hold on to those which are refuted by the Quran, we can never ever be able to benefit from the Quran the way Quran wants us to get benefit from its guidance. Further reflections on this verse. The next point highlighted concerns the associating of partners with Allah, i.e. in his domain of authority. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ شَرِيكٌ فِي الْمُلْكِ, and has no partner in his dominion. This point needs further elaboration as this is reiterated throughout the Quran. Why does Allah emphasize so much on this aspect to remind us? This needs to be grasped with respect to the human psyche. We have seen that the Quran exhorts us to bring about a change in our psyche, outlook, vision, and thinking, and try to grasp this fact that Allah is Allah in the outer world as well as Allah in the human world. There is no dispute in his being Allah in the outer world. Even those who claim to be atheists, they also say that there is some creator, there is some designer who has created whole of this universe. However, they also say that we don't need him. However, when it comes to the human world, we become unsure how he can be Allah in the human world when we clearly see pharaohs ruling over human beings through man-made laws. A very important point as students of the Quran, that when we see pharaohs in the world, we don't see Allah coming into it. Even if we are reading the Quran, we think that we are living in a pharaoh's world. How can this system of pharaoh can be changed? But these kind of ideas also came in the mind of Bani Israel and of Mu'mineen of earlier era. But what they did was they acquired Eimaan in the Quran and started following it, and then see how things change. Because Ilah means that whose rule has to be accepted. If we are accepting the rule of pharaohs in the world willingly and not rejecting them, at least in our hearts initially, then essentially we are not getting anything from the Quran. The Quran tells us that no matter who rules in the human world, Allah is still the ruler. And if we, having recognized this fact and start to follow the Quran after accepting Eimaan, then things will start to change. This whole process is signposted in the Book of Allah. So it is important that when Quran says shirk, it means that we have to get rid of all belief systems which we have inherited or which occupied our minds willingly, unwillingly, and then give space to that concept of Allah which is given in the Quran. Unity of thought and outlook. This is where we have to accept Eimaan in Allah by turning our face away from every taghuti power in the world. La ikraha fi Deen qad tabayyana rushdu min al-ghayy faman yakfur bit-taghuti wa yu'min billah. There is no compulsion in the matter of Deen. The path of truth stands clear from wrong. Whoever rejects evil, that is taghut, and has Eimaan in Allah. I will also say that there is a verse 476, that is Surah Nisa 76. It's worth looking at that as well. We should look at it as a procedure to obtain success on this path rather than concentrating on the power of the pharaohs in the world. So we should move away from pharaohs, not of course totally ignoring them, because the changes are taking place in the world and we should know that how the man-made system is progressing under the law of requital, but not letting it overwhelm our feelings. Once we have moved to the Quran, then essentially we have accepted Eimaan in Allah, and now we have to look towards Allah's laws and see how those help us. Allah is not asking us to become successful on this path from day one or within a few years. Not at all. All He is advising is to reject the path of Taghut and accept Eimaan after becoming dissatisfied with man-made systems and to start working with those who are already on this path. Following this, do not expect quick results on this path, part of being patient. Continue to follow the procedure and educate and train yourselves together. Make sure your Eimaan remains solid and never think of giving up. Keep building on your understanding of the system of Deen and keep performing salih deeds, keeping in mind that this is how the self develops and Deen expands. And we will see that the self will be developing and self is developing and Deen is expanding as we make progress on this path. Supremacy of Allah, what it means. This striving will eliminate the fear of Taghuti forces, and gradually unity among Mu'mineen will develop and brotherhood will become evidently clear. This will serve as a sign that the path taken is correct. At the same time, Deen will keep becoming clearer by staying together. Then in the next part of the verse, the Quran points to another important aspect. Having rejected all the partners of the human system, it states, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ وَلِيٌّ مِّنَ الْذُلِّ. Nor does he need any to protect him from any diminishing of power. Absolutely firm belief, firm Eimaan that Allah's laws are working and He, as a provider of guidance, will guide us through the Quran as we progress on this path. Verse 2 to 5-7 provides assurance to Mu'mineen when it says, Allahu waliyul lazina amanu yukhrijuhum minal zulumati ilan nur. Allah is the companion of those who accept Eimaan. From the depths of darkness, He will lead them into light. And how do we know about the darkness? We can look at the world of religion and its manifestations. Even the non-Quranic world, we can see all kinds of darknesses descend on them. And in order to come out of it, how the light of the Quran helps us. What is the purpose of acquiring this new psyche? The final part of the verse states, وَكَبِّرْهُ تَكْبِيرًا, to establish the system of Deen so that all those duties and responsibilities can be undertaken which the Quran has noted. And because these are not undertaken, because of the absence of any Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen, we see how much darkness is there in the world and how much tyranny and suppression is taking place right before our own eyes. This will lead to providing the evidence that what Allah has declared in the Quran is great for the good of mankind. A world will come into existence which will be free from fear and grief. Finally, some reflections of interest. In relation to the human psyche, we have seen that the Quran has addressed the human intellect and emotions in order to highlight the importance of Eimaan and its manifestation in the human world. The Quran points to man with reference to the importance of his own status and stature, for whom planet Earth is created as the first stage for his evolutionary progression towards further stages of self-development. We should not underestimate our own potentials. Allah has given us, each one of us, given us all those latent potentials which can be brought out using the Quran. So Quran is telling us about our own importance as human beings who can become companions of Allah in carrying out His duties and responsibilities in the world, and then we will see how the changes take place in the outer world. The first step is change our own inner world, our own inner psyche. There is one status which is the loftiest and most revolutionary, which relates to the companionship between man and Allah. This reality is explained in the Quran in various ways and angles. In the creative program of Allah, whatever is to be created, potentials and abilities are kept within man for him to become what he is intended to ultimately become. This is a very carefully put down sentence. I was going through the translation of volume 4 of the meanings of the Quran, and I came across this paragraph, and I thought I should share it with everyone over here. And we should keep reminding our own self about our own importance. We are an extremely important creation in the universe, and we have tremendous potentials, which we are now identifying within our own self through these presentations. This means that when the Quran enjoins us to not associate anyone else with Allah, it means that it is because this will hamper our latent potentials, and we cannot allow anyone to do that, including our own self. And we should tell our own self and our own thoughts, don't ruin our potentials. We will bring them out. And we will be unable to achieve that aim for which these potentials exist in our self. And once we start displaying those potentials, we have seen that how much better human beings become, how much better our being becomes, how we become insightful. Hence, we should never allow these beliefs, concepts, dogmas, doctrines, etc. about life to reside in our mind which do not find support from the Quran, and which means that we should be aware of the permanent values of the Quran and, of course, the divine attributes. If this batil occupies our thoughts process, conscious and subconscious, then we are of no use to the system of Deen here in this life as well as in the life of the hereafter. And just to remind ourselves that the life of the hereafter has Deen already established. So we have to make ourselves fit for that Deen which exists in the hereafter, even if that Deen does not materialize during our finite lifetime in this world. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen. Thank you.